How many discounts does USAA Auto Insurance offer? Too many to say here. Multi-vehicle discount, safe driver discount, new vehicle discount, storage discount, legacy.
How many discounts will you stack up? Visit USAA.com/auto discounts. Restrictions apply.
Vitamin Water Zero Sugar has great taste, zero BS, and obviously zero sugar. For those with zero room in their calendar. Zero patience for slow walkers. Those who get 0 hours of sleep on a Saturday night. Have zero filter, zero given, and zero interest in grabbing a plain, boring water. Grab a delicious Vitamin Water Zero Sugar today.
Hey, it's Paris. You know I love sparkly things, right? Like stars. Duh. And thanks to Hilton and Auto Camp, I just slept under them. Picture me, serving looks by the fire outside my luxurious Airstream, making s'mores with the kids, while a national park is our backdrop. The great outdoors meets Hilton hospitality. That's hot. Explore all the new ways to stay at Hilton.com. Hilton for the stay.
Hey guys, how you doing? It's Mick Tully from the World of Martial Arts television show. As always, thank you for your support. And if you subscribe, and then also what you'll do is you'll get the alerts. And then when we get new stuff, it always comes out that we only have top quality guys with us. So today, it's a return. It's actually a return performance from, he'll be raging when I say this. The guy was one of my heroes growing up. I used to read about him. I used to love his articles, and I used to love his columns in the magazines. For some of you older guys, Terry O'Neill's Fighting Arts was always, I think that personally, I think was where he did most of his great work. And he is the one, the only, a true Renaissance man. And I mean that. Guru Chris Parker. Chris, how you doing, man?
I'm very well. Thank you very much. How are you?
I'm living the dream, man. As you well know, it's like, I get to chat to you, and we're going to get into it because this was never going to be a part two. So when we started talking last time, we were talking about life, the universe, everything. We were talking about your training. You Jedi mind tricked me to the point that I didn't know if I was coming or going. I was literally, honestly, these aren't the joys you're looking for. You got all of that. If you don't know that Star Wars reference, then shame on you. You shouldn't even be into martial arts if you're not a geek, right? But anyway, we started talking, and we stumbled across. Well, we didn't stumble across you as an author, but we stumbled across some of the stuff that you wrote about. And that's what we're talking about today, right? And I'm going to start with a really, really, really easy question, right? Okay, the brain always wins 2. So there was a brain always wins 1, right? So we're going to start right there. What possessed you to start writing about the brain always wins?
I met a man, and that would be an answer to a lot of the most exciting, important, valuable changes in my life, actually. If the most important, I would say I met a particular woman, but ignoring my personal life and the most important relationship in my life, the others, I happened to just meet some very, very significant chaps. And I met a very, very significant chap, Dr. John Sullivan, who's one of America's and the world's leading clinical and sports psychologists. And how I met him was quite funny, actually. I was lecturing at Nottingham Trent University at the time, and my boss was one of my very, very dear friends. She still is. She's an American lady. She calls me English dad. I call her American daughter. That's how tight we are. And she'd said to me on a Friday, Chris, what are you doing for the weekend? Oh, I'm doing not much. I'm going to watch a bit of rugby league on telly or something, whatever it is. Do some catch up on some back episodes of Loose Women. I'm not going too far. Going to have a relaxing time. I said, what about you? You've got a little look in your face, my girl. What's going on? Tell Daddy. And she said, well, there's a guy I went out with, decades ago in America, and he's just messaged me. He's been doing a workshop for 2 days in Ireland, and he's flying back via Birmingham, wanted to know if we wanted to go out tonight. So I thought it'd be great to catch up. I went, okay, cool. Fast forward Monday morning, I go into her office, start to ask, how was your Friday night? didn't need to finish the sentence. The glow told you everything that you needed to know. And I said, where is he? And she said, he's in that room over there, doing some work on his computer. He's not flying back for a few days. Shall I take him to the Mandarin restaurant? A friend of mine's got the best Chinese restaurant in Nottingham. Shall we go? She said, I'd love you to. We get in the car. He's a car geek. I'm not. So it takes him about 90 seconds, because he's one of the world's best clinical and sports psychologists, to realize that, I point and do this. I haven't got a clue. We get to the Mandarin. We starting to eat. After about 20 minutes, he said, so you're checking me out, aren't you, Chris? I went, yeah, absolutely. All day long, 100%, mate. I said, 100%, I'm checking you out. Here's the thing, because I think you're a really nice guy, and I'm almost nervous to say I have a few comm skills but I'm not a you, do you know? But here's the thing. If you fall out with it, if you split up, I don't care. If you do anything deliberately spiteful or manipulative, I'll come over to America. I'll bring a big person with me who will kick your ass, because obviously I only do this stuff, and that you can't use that to kick anybody's ass, right? And he went, oh, I got it. I understood. What I didn't know at the time is that some of his best friends are former Navy SEAL Team 6 operatives. I have since said to him, John, if I'd known that, mate, I would never have said any of that. I wasn't threatening you. I didn't listen, I don't care about it that much. Honestly, do just whatever. However, I don't care. So we started to become mates. And him and Tony, my American daughter, are now married, living in New Zealand. He's head of sports psychology for High Performance Sport New Zealand at the moment. And while we were talking, the best thing, right, this, is if you can be the thickest person in the room, you can just ask questions. It's just amazing. So I would love to go out with John C, and I'd be asking him, put this guy in perspective. Head of sports science for the New England Patriots for 16 years. They won, I don't know, 6 Super Bowls out of 8 finals during that time. He was headhunted to go and work for the Navy SEALs, specifically picked out and asked. He created programs in the area of performance enhancement, and he was responsible for helping them with combat medical procedures. He was a consultant for the Los Angeles police for a few years. He's on his CV, which is about 10 pages. Being a consultant for NASA gets onto page 3.
Wow.
Right? I'd be dining on that forever, just that one. Right? Yeah. Amazing guy. And he kept using this phrase, the brain always wins. He said, Chris, the brain always wins. And I said, okay, explain it. And he explained to me that, he said, the brain's the governor. It works with all our subsystems, but it's the governor. Everything we do, how we perceive things, how we walk, how we move, how we smell, how we touch, how we breathe, how we think, how we emote, brain is the governor. And I was like, wow, this is fascinating. And then I contacted my publisher and said, I think we've got a book here. This was the original book. Come up and meet this guy. So he did. Part of John's genius is that you don't have to be a scientist for him to make it make sense for you. That's part of and you don't feel patronized.
Yeah, exactly.
I had a friend at the university, another leading professor who was once explaining something. He said, I'll explain this thing to you, Chris, about the brain. He said, and when I say it, I'm not going to say it in a patronizing way. And then he paused, and then he said to me, and by the way, patronizing means just perfect. John doesn't do the jokey stuff. He's brilliant.
But you see, if you don't mind, I have to jump in here, because obviously, I won't lie to you. You very kindly sent me the book. Started reading it, couldn't put it down. If you want to know the truth, it's very funny what you said there. You said, well, I just wouldn't have said this, right? If I'd have known, who your friends were, I wouldn't have come out with this cavalier, I'm going to bring a large man over to America. And I won't lie to you, there's going to be a bit of a spoiler. For guys, first of all, trust me, I don't say this a lot. This book will change your life. And I mean that. But here's the spoiler. The spoiler is, I would get maybe into about chapter 3, get towards the end of Rest and Recovery, then go and have a look at the start. The forward's fine, but what it is the testimonials that they can put you off, because you look at these guys and literally it's like, wow. And it's really funny what you're saying, because I'm looking at them going, SEAL team. Then it's like you got a couple of guys from the SEALs. Then you got a couple of guys that played. They didn't just play for the New England Patriots. They were like holding records in the franchise for either like appearances or for scoring. Right. So you saw that, and then I'm like, so what have they got in common with me? And then that's the funny thing, because what have they got in common with? They got 2 arms, 2 legs, and they got a brain. And they've worked maybe a little bit harder than me. In that, they were blessed to find what they were interested in and go. But like what I was going to say is the thing about what you said about it not being patronising. It's one of those. You start trying to read about your brain, and like you got to remember, I'm a construction worker, and I'm quite a well-read construction worker. But like to start looking at the brain fascinates me anyway. But it's that point where you're going, I don't want to feel like overwhelmed here. And then as soon as you go in the governor, I'll tell you right now, it's worth buying the book just for the chapter on the governor, because once you realise he runs the show, you get to influence him a little bit. But the crazy thing is, you think that you're going to influence him like that. No, you've influenced him maybe 25, 30 years ago. So choices that you made then come back now to fruition. And I just wanted to interject that, because it's there's 2 things that I want you to expand on, right? So actually, no, we'll just go with the first one. So the first one is, at what point did you realize that the best way to frame this book would be to bookend everything with making somebody privy to your conversation? Because when I started reading it and it went, the conversations continue, I was like, what does that mean? And then you realize that everything is prefixed with a conversation. And then that conversation, it is like, I'm not putting you up here, Chris, but they are so well timed, and they're so I'm trying to think of the best word to you. They're very, very, very they're almost like they're right at the right time. Does that make sense in the book? So I'm trying to think, prescient be a good word if I was a well-read man, but I'll use that. Yeah, come on, mate. Every now and again, I look like a strategically shaved monkey, and then every now and again I throw in a couple of like 2 or 3 syllables banged together, and everyone goes, "Oh, Jesus, yeah." But no, as I said, the conversational part is the one that. At what point did you realise that to make people? Because it's almost like it's quite funny, because it's very similar to the way that myself and Will work our podcasts, where Will's the third man sitting in on it, right? So in the book, we become Will. So there's this conversation going on, but we're Will. We're sitting in on it, and we get all of the gold without having to do any of the work. Does that make sense? I don't want to make it look like Will doesn't do a lot, but what I'm saying is, does that make sense?
Absolutely. The answer to your question is it grew out the first book because we didn't have those explicit conversations in the way you've just described them in the first book, but it was very conversational. Yeah. And a lot of the feedback, because the book sold very well, because there's a lot of people out there with brains, right? And John's got a reputation. He's the quiet man. Like you said about the testimonials, it's the people who know him, and then you go, I've never heard of him. Oh my God. Okay. Because he's a proper professional. He's a humble scientist and a proper psychologist. He's worked with more famous people. There is a particular, probably the most famous person from the Patriots at that time, and John would be working with him one-on-one most weeks, or regularly. And I said to him, why have you never mentioned? I know of somebody who worked with this particular player who was regarded as the standout player of his generation, in a sense. I said, and I know somebody who's worked with him. I've seen this guy who's worked with him all over social media going, I've worked with this guy. Why haven't you said that? And he went, I'm a psychologist. You don't talk about your clients. And he said, and they're still my clients. Even though I'm into performance enhancement or helping, whatever, they're my clients. Why would I talk about them? And I went, wow, okay, that's really interesting. And then he told me, about the importance of conversations. And in my book, Conversations with My Dog, my comms book that came out about 2 years ago, I'm talking about conversations as the building blocks of communication, by extension, the building blocks of societies, of nations, whether they're, face to face or like we're doing now, or, using technology, whether they're on social media or whatever they are. So he was talking, and I said, we'll write this first book, we'll make it conversational, because we're writing the book for me and my mates, and let's highlight the thing that you say conversations are so significant. Feedback was amazing. We waited quite a few years, obviously, and right, shall we do book 2? Yes, we should. Let's grow the conversational thing. Let's use the feedback we've got and build off it. And he was over in the UK for a week. His wife was doing various talks and so on. And so we sat down in my local in Nottingham city centre for 5 days and did about 50 hours of conversation. And that led to this, to these explicit conversations, where in a sense, I'm just every man asking the questions, and on behalf of, the book is for me and my mates. And the great thing again about John and the book, because I've learned so much from obviously just being with him and questioning him, and then having to write about his work because it's his work. The great thing that you get from John is the notion that bespoke is always best educatively. We can teach 200 people at once, and because they've got brains, if they're motivated and you're good, they'll still get something. But we're all uniquely slightly different. We're all on the spectrum somewhere, as John would say. So ideally, the best education, like the best healing, like the best everything, is one-to-one. It's bespoke. So what happens here is you can create your own bespoke brain management process. And the word process matters because that's how I modeled his work. So when we met, he didn't have a process model. That was me talking to him for hundreds of hours, looking for a way I could model it. I've done the same with some other geniuses in books. Because if you can model their work, then it's easy. You can build a framework that helps people understand it and they can use it. So he was talking about, these different elements. And I went, that's the word process. We've got physical activity, here's the P, rest and recovery, optimum nutrition, we've got cognitive function, we've got emotional management, we've got socialization and communication. And then
synergy.
You bring it all together. You've got synergy, indeed. So once we'd got that and we'd got conversations, it worked in the first book. We just developed it and put a whole load of new material, updated the science because science has moved on, of course, added some new things into the new book, and teamed up with, I think in the book, there are maybe 8 different neurotechnology companies that we introduce readers to, and readers can actually get discounts from these companies from their kit because they're readers of the book. And the great thing again about John, if I may say, just to finish this, he works, of course, as a science consultant for these companies and others, and takes not a penny. We have no business deal with these companies. They're not paying to be in the book. He works for them as he has done it for decades. He works as a science consultant, but you can't pay him because if he thinks you're not doing great science, he'll tell you. And if you carry on doing the work, he'll leave and he'll tell people your science has gone down the path.
Yeah. But
the technology in here, there's absolutely nothing in it for me or John. It's a great business move. What can I tell you? But that's how principled he is at what he does and how he operates.
Yeah, well, it's so funny because the thing was, I'm always wary of acronyms when you see them, right? Because there's for 1 in 10 makes sense. Like, there's a guy, I won't mention his name, but he had a knife-based, reality-based defense system called Stab. And it was pretty good. I don't want to say punchy, a bit of a cliche, right? But it was a pretty good thing. And then it was called Strategic Tactics Against Blades. And I went, oh, wow, that sounds really good. And then I was with Rick Fay, actually, and we were talking about this. And Rick said, when he spoke to the guy, I won't mention his name, but he turned around and he said, where did you get this? Is empirical knowledge, because the way that you're presenting this material, it's obviously you're a guy who's been there. And you go, oh yeah, he goes, yeah, I've had seven real altercations where people have tried to stab you, and this is where you see Rick Fay, because Rick Fay turned around like me, I'm callow youth that I was like, oh wow, that's cool. And Rick's going, so 7 people found it that the only way that they could actually deal with you being in their life was to have to kill you. And that's when I walked away and I went, all right. So that was after that. Every acronym, I was like, I'm going to look more closely at that. But it was so funny what you said about John, because it is prologue. I love it because it's got science is the conversation we are having, and that continues. Good science is done in a way which we advance our knowledge and purge our errors, right? Which at the moment, like that literally is straight in, and it's still in the prologue. And as soon as I got that, that's what got me and hooked me, because it's the start of the convo, right? And you know yourself, we're now in a world where people take advice from people online, and when you say trust the science, and they go, like I've made a joke about this for years about the vaccine, where people go, oh, that vaccine is going to kill. And I went, really? They're going to kill all of the compliant people in society. I don't know. Have you ever read any Aldous Huxley? Right, yeah. So we're gonna keep all of you guys that don't follow orders, and they're gonna kill all of us. And they were like, "Well, why would you take the vaccine?" And me being a silly idiot, I was like, "Well, I've seen the X-Men, and what I'm running the risk of mild autism, but I could be invisible. You know what I mean? It's like there's sometimes side effects could be pretty cool. Knowing me, I'd grow an extra arm out, or something. I don't know what it would be, but yeah, the science thing is really funny because it's been so demonized. And especially in martial arts, and I'd really like your thoughts on this, right? So for a gentleman who is more than well known for being in a martial arts, in a martial art that can be quite esoteric and a bit woo-woo in certain regards with silat, right? That's at one end of the spectrum. And then in martial arts, which I love I really, really want to believe in chi, but I think it's just physics. So I just go like that. I say, do you see that Bruce Lee 1-inch punch? I want to say it's chi, but I think it's mass, force, acceleration, speed, and gravity. I think that's what it is. And the reason I've used all that silly preamble is, in martial arts, Chris, we don't really want to try and understand that there is a physical reason, and once we understand the reasoning, we can start, as you were saying earlier, we can frame it and we can mold it and we can get it to make us suit us, right? So it's like, first of all, please don't turn around and tell me you believe in chi and then send me some mad via Zoom chi Dimac that's going to make me die in 50 years. But having said that, 106, man, I'll live with that. But if it's 50 hours, we might cry. But why do you think there's this sort of resistance to wanting to understand that sometimes science can give us the answers, especially in martial arts?
Yeah, I mean, your point is valid. I mean, John says it in the book, we're living in a time now where we don't even agree on the facts. We don't even agree on, and of course there is, like in anything else, there's very good science, and then there's science that means to be good is just done badly, and then you've got people who are paid to do a certain type of science to come up with a certain type of result, and nowadays you can actually pay to get your research published in certain journals. You couldn't once upon a time. Your work appeared in peer-reviewed journals, and and it had been rigorously tested. And one of the great things that I love about great scientists like John is they come up with a hypothesis and then they try and destroy it through their own research. Most of us are desperate to prove anything we believe just by talking about it more or finding anything, as you say, we go, oh, it says it as well, it must be true, without checking sources and so on and so forth. So people like John and other great scientists that I had the privilege of working with when I was at the university, they come up with a theory, a hypothesis, and then to test it, they're trying to destroy that. And then if they come up, whatever the results they come up with, they pass that on to other like-minded peers who also then try and find what's wrong with their research and why the results can't be trusted. And then you can go to, and again, John talks about it in the book, meta-analysis, where there's studies of lots of very good research to see where they agree. but it requires work on our behalf if we're going to sort out the good science and the results from the rest, if you like. And in terms of this, and in terms of the brain always wins and martial arts, man, one of the great things it did for me when I started learning from John, and let me just say, I am an absolute beginner at this stuff. Right? If you gave me a picture of the brain, I could label the bits. I can talk to you about what's in the book, but just because I can talk about it doesn't mean I'm an expert in it. Right? And one of the things I think is really important in any area of learning and study, martial arts and anything else, is be honest where you're at. You can say some words, you can know what they mean, you can know some facts. What does that mean compared to the people who really understand it? So I'm the writer here. You know, I'm not a neuroscientist. I'm not a psychologist. I can talk to you about it, but I'm talking on behalf of. Back to being in the room with people who are way better at stuff than you, and that's the best place to be. And so the brain always wins process really brought home to me how incredibly good martial arts is for us if we do it well. We've got the physical activity, it's good for our brain, is the point. Let's do these things with a brain focus. Movement is good for our brain, as long as we're doing good movement that's safe for our body. Rest and recovery, well, we ought to be. You know, there's enough information out there now, and unless we're going to decide that we're somehow, you know, going to be very resilient and, you know, run at 4 a.m. in the morning, 3 hours before we've gone to sleep with razor blades fastened to our bare feet, running backwards with pins in our eyes, you know, and testing, you know what I mean? Yeah. We need rest and recovery. Emotional management. Well, tell me you don't learn about emotions and have the opportunities to manage them doing martial arts. Cognitive function, you read stuff, you learn, you have to think. If people are teaching you concepts or principles, you've got to work those out. You've got to join the dots. Socialization. I can't think of a more important reason to do martial arts than to get in a room with a load of like-minded people from different backgrounds who are doing it for their own reason, but somehow we come together and we get on and we share lives together. Synergy, you know, so anybody who does martial arts should absolutely, here's the sell, right, get the book, because you can actually start looking at what you're teaching and what you're practicing from a brain first perspective, which can tweak how you teach it, tweak how you practice, and make you go, my goodness gracious me, martial arts. If I was teaching kids now, I could not justify not coming at martial arts as a brilliant brain first, all encompassing activity that done well will do an absolute amazing job at ensuring brain health and function, which in turn will improve the quality of your performance in every aspect of your life.
But it's so funny. It's so funny you said this, because so yesterday, said it's on my bucket list to get you two guys to connect you up. Is Professor John Bernard Will. So John Will, one of the famous Dirty Dozen, first Australian to get his black belt, smartest guy. Like, along with you, there's 4 people that I know that I'm like, right, that and this is, I'm being a bit braggadocious here because I can bullshit quite well, you know. So I'm quite a well-read man, and I know just enough of the cool stuff to be, as I always say, if you order Joe Rogan off Temu, you get me. So I can be left in a room and have a conversation, and at about 30 minutes in, I'm going to go make an excuse to go because I've run out of all of the material. But for that 30 minutes, I'm a pretty smart cat while I'm in there, right? And John Will is the only guy I know that he was telling me a couple of years ago. It's funny because for the really profound stuff that he's taught me, as I only told him this yesterday, I met him through the wonderful Tony Terranova, right? So Tony Terranova had him over, and this was 16 years ago now, 15, 16 years ago. No, it's got to be. So I'm 56, and I was in Henzo's. I walked out Henzo Gracie's on my 40th birthday. So that's 16 years ago. And I was like, and I'd already trained with John at that stage. And I remember I saw John, and I was like, as I've said before about, I'm going to bore people with this. This is my BJJ story. I went over to the custard factory, trained with Maurizio Gomez, had the shit kicked out of me. And I never take the mickey out of anybody who's been through trauma, but I was like a trauma victim when I drove home, and I had 2 options. I can accept that this has happened to me and do something about it, you know, like Jennifer Lopez in that movie where she learned how to do Krav Maga on Ben Affleck. Oh no, that was real life. She did that. No, I'm only joking there. That was a joke, by the way. I don't think she ever hit him. But the other one is I can pretend it never happened, which is what I did. And then I go and meet John, and I spend 3 hours in his company. And after 3 hours in his company, I remember turning around to LPs and going, if BJJ gets you to be able to think like that guy, I'm doing BJJ. And we were laughing about it yesterday because he goes, so I'm to blame, am I? And I went, yeah, for a really bad half guard. Yeah, you can blame it. That's me now. But I said, John, if you were doing Tai Chi, I would have followed you on this. And over the years, and then obviously I finally met up with Neil Simpkin, and he just put me through the crucible and made me the man I am today, which like some days I used to hate him. But, yeah, I had to go through that. That's funny enough, while I was reading about the process, I was like, shit, that's Neil Simpkin. I've been in there, right there. That's where I was. Whether or not we both knew it was happening at the time, but that's a different thing. So John yesterday, I told all that preamble. So if you don't know who he is, he's amazing. He's a guy that you got to go out and look out for. He used to spend $20,000 a year just on making himself a better person. So he would take private tuition in different spheres of life. So like he had a guy who was a financial advisor who did jiu-jitsu with him. He goes, right, so how much do you charge an hour for me to just pick your brains and you be able to teach me how to be good with finance? Paid the guy, did it. And the guy was like, no, we'll just have privates. And John, like myself, is very OCD, very ADHD. So he's like, no, I need to compartmentalize this because when I pay for it, there's a value to it. Anyway, so yesterday, it was so funny because he said, what brought me into martial arts isn't what kept me in there. He goes, I looked through everything through the filter of it had to work until I was a purple belt. And then I realized that I wouldn't stay in this art. And what keeps him in, this is the funny thing, you'll love this, is the complexity. Like it's like he'll work something out and then work out 15 different ways why it can't work. It's like the armbar, right? One way of armbar, you need to know 5 ways to be able to defend the armbar, right? And whether or not that's because we're weak as humans and we want to overcompensate, I don't know. But John yesterday was so funny because everything that you talked about just then about martial arts, he literally said, 24 hours ago, because we finished at 5 o'clock. Yeah. And everything he said, he goes, people are now saying they bring their children to a class and they go, oh, they're having behavioral issues and they don't work very well, in social association groups. Bring them to jiu-jitsu and it seems to work, Chris. And it's just unreal the way it is. So I want to go into something and you might be able to help me on this. So John Will was the first guy to explain to me about how repetitive. So, where, practice makes perfect. You know, that classic line. You go, no, perfect practice makes perfect. Yeah. Practice of something shit just makes you really, really good at doing something shit. Yeah. But he was explaining about the myelin sheath and the brain and how this worked. And that was the first time that I realized that I had to look at the brain as a more organic thing, because you might be able to help me with this. As humans, we don't really want to look at it. Like we can look at our liver and our lungs and our heart and see it as an organic thing, right? But why is it we can't look at our brain like that? Is it because it's so complex, or what's your thoughts?
There's certainly a massive complexity in it, isn't it? I mean, you've got world-leading physicists saying that the brain is the most complex thing in the known universe. You've certainly got somebody like John, who in the books describes it as the most significant self-defense tool, if you will, in the known universe because of its ability to adapt and so on. The idea of the phrase "the brain always wins" means that how you treat your brain and how it develops because of the stimuli you give it and your own habits to do with movement or rest and recovery or emotional management and nutrition and so on. That's what it will give you back. But it's complex. When you start to work out how many billions of neuron connections, neurological connections there are in your brain, I can't deal with that number. I can't understand a car, right? Go back to what I was saying earlier, let alone the brain. And I think it touches on an aspect. I mean, again, connected to what you was just saying about this great man. Everything is complex. We just look for quick and easy answers because they work for us. The opposite of John Sullivan saying bespoke is best and you need a personalised process is somebody saying, I've got a 4-step easy process, easy solution. It works for everybody. This is how you become a this in 6 months. This is how you stop doing this in 3 weeks. This 4-step process, it's the easiest thing in the world. You can all do it. Not true. It's just not true. Paracetamol will kill one person in so many millions. You can't go, this works for everyone. You just can't. And we want quick and easy answers. Well, if somebody explains something that's complex really brilliantly and they make it simple, their simple words don't mean to them what they mean to the rest of us, because they understand the complexity, the layers of depth in that simple thing. So the beginner hears it and goes, oh yeah, the answer is in this one sentence. And it is to that person who's got 40 years of daily study. Yeah. To the beginner, it's just a sentence. Like I said to you, I can talk about aspects of this book, but not in the way I could talk about other things. The words only mean what I'm saying to me.
Yeah.
In other areas, I might answer your question and the words have layers and layers of meaning and understanding to me because I've been studying that thing for 40 or 50 years. And then we've also got, of course, it's confusing. I mean, you touched on this. You said earlier about science being demonized. And how do we know who to trust? Well, if you could tell that we know the power of storytelling, right? But actually, there are people then who go, well, I'll tell very good stories. And then loads of people will get to know what I'm saying and they'll know the story and I'll tell them truths, facts through my stories. So how many times now do you see people, for example, saying, oh, yeah, you need 10,000 hours of practice, of repetition, because I read the book Outliers by Malcolm Gladwell and it was 10,000. It's 10. That's a great example, right? Anders Ericsson was the scientist who did the research that he's quoting. I know he did other stories as well. He talked about the Beatles and people.
Yeah.
He actually went to the research by a guy called Anders Ericsson, who was researching elite musicians, expert musicians. And Anders Ericsson has since said, well, Anders Ericsson, if I get the phrase right, he said it was very nicely as an academic. He said, that's a provocative generalization. That's not what my research shows. And John Sullivan, I said, what do you think about this stuff, John? And he said, isn't it interesting that the brain needs such a nice round number as 10,000? And we all need that nice round. It's just not true. But if it gets lots of press and if it sells a lot of books, and then we go, I need 10,000 hours. Complexity is inevitable in everything, because we're just as a human being, we're incredibly complex in all sorts of ways, physiologically, emotionally, socially, we're complex. How amazing is that? Yeah. Do you know that we've got a brain, dear God? Do you know when I used to teach and somebody said to me, I can't learn this, I can't do this, I'd always say, yeah. Any decent teacher would always say, yet. But actually, as you get a little bit of an insight into the brain, you go, you've got the most amazing thing in the known universe right in there, mate. Your social sense of yourself, your emotional sense of you, I get it, you don't think you can. If we give that kid the right stimulus, it's a brain. Oh, my God.
Yeah. But it's so funny you said that, because it's like, you know, I did the practitioner, I did the master practitioner NLP, as I've said before. I did it not to be a counsellor, not even to be a nice guy. It was just, I was a builder and there was a couple of guys I just couldn't connect with. And I couldn't work out, because I'm like, yeah, but I'm awesome. Like, yeah, I don't want to sound like, I don't want to sound like Donald Trump here, but I'm terrific. No, so I was like, let's go. No, but I'm really, how? And then I couldn't work it out. And then I think I watched something Robbins did. So yeah, and you got to give Robbins his due, right? You want to talk about a guy who's the complete opposite to bespoke for humanity, that guy, because it's like, right, so he gets 10,000 people, he go, yeah, and he's telling them all different, and they experience it differently. And it's so funny, so it's a bit of an anecdote I've got to throw out here. Last week, I saw a genius at work. I went to see Bruce Springsteen at Anfield in concert, and it was like time travel. He brought me back to being Mick Tully, who went to see him in the 80s. He then brought me back to Mick Tully, who saw him in the 90s. Then he brought me back to Mick Tully, who saw him in 2016. Then he brought me back to today. All experiential, all at the same time, listening to music. And I'm fascinated by music because it's like, you know, it's famously people who have Alzheimer's can't do anything. Play a song, they remember all the words, boom, they're back in. You get that joy for a minute, you're there, right? So Springsteen was able to talk to 65,000 people, sing one song. There were 65,000 different responses. Some of them might have been the same-ish, but based on our life experiences, yeah, the river to some people, to me, if you're not a Springsteen fan, you should be. And yeah, certainly not to get me demonetized or to get me on the watch list in America. Guess what? Springsteen has got a set of nuts on him that most people don't have at the moment. He's speaking out about something that even I didn't take that seriously, right? And I'm not going to go any further than that. But he basically used his platform, said what he wanted to say, and then ironically, this is the mad thing. The reason I'm saying all of this is people who have listened to him for years and they go, I never realised he was that political. They go, you never listened to Born in the USA, mate? You know, yeah, that's about the shit deal they got when they came back from Vietnam. Yeah, but like it was like with Robbins, as I said, Robbins was the one because I saw him do NLP, but all I saw at the time I didn't realise it. It was mass hypnosis, and then I saw it, and I just could see the parallels in the martial arts world because so many of my friends who are into martial arts were like, I've read this book about Tony. It's amazing. I'm like, now you sound like you're a salesman. You're not selling martial arts. You want to just see how you can get 45 people in that class and they'll come back week in, week out. You know, I have to be very careful what I say next, right? I've got a friend of mine, very, very successful. He's amazing. But I used to say to him, the business model that he had, if it was a recovery program, he'd be considered a failure because he had the same people coming back year in, year out for the same thing. And I was like, and they haven't moved on. Sorry, mate. Like, that's the guy who's like, I'm going to give up drinking. And he comes back a year later. He's still drinking. Yeah, I'm still drinking. You go, right, okay, failure. But like, you understand where I'm coming from, right? So this all leads me to the whole thing about, you said earlier, yeah, it's about the complexity. And I've used this line so many times about martial arts. When we first started doing karate, there was two things. We were learning something from a different culture with weird, crazy names, teaching it to huge amounts of people. So that's why everything had to be so pronounced, because you had to see people to get it. And then you also had, this is the whole thing about, I only really understood VACOG when I did NLP. And this is actually the reason when you started talking about being able to teach and being able to get the message across, was understanding that people see the world completely differently to you, how they get their information. As I always say, I say this to my wife all the time, I can only be held responsible for what I say. I can't be held responsible for what you hear. Yeah, and I know that's a bit of a joke, but I'd like your thoughts on that, because reading the book, it fleshed it out for me. The understanding of, to learn anything, the first thing we have to do is experience it and see it. And can you explain some of that for the guys who haven't dropped about £5,500 on NLP courses and had to put up with Darren Brown for a day and a half like I did?
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, we talk about the importance of experiential learning. What again, we're going to just drift back into the notion of bespoke, because if you give 10 people in a room the same experience, they'll experience it slightly differently, most probably. Yeah, you know, one of the things that we do when we teach in silat fitra, we have sort of certain, you know, it's a principle based art, but we have certain approaches to how we teach. So people are expected, who are our teachers, to add in their own uniqueness. But at the same time, they're expected to follow certain procedures. And one of the things that we do is when we demonstrate, you know, a movement or a sequence of movements, we do it in silence and we demonstrate it 4 times. And the student gets to know this. So one of the benefits, if you have a repetitive structure to a lesson, is the students' brains no longer have to go, where's this going? they predicted already the structure. So the more you can take away uncertainty in a lesson, if you want to do great learning, I do a different type of teaching, did do with Eddie and Guru Eddie and Guru Catherine, which we refer to as village teaching. That's the opposite. What we do on camps and on the online community and our instructors programs is what I call it city teaching. It's good Western science-based teaching. So one of the things that we do is we have certain structures. So the students go, I know this will happen. Once their brain doesn't have to predict, they've got more brain energy, and it's fatiguing for the brain if it doesn't know where we're going, trying to work out the patterns, to focus in. So I'm going to demonstrate this. We'll demonstrate it 4 times. I won't talk while I demonstrate it, because if I'm talking, you've got to listen to me and look. And I know we can multitask, but actually, and the brain is amazing, I want to make it as easy as possible. I'm then going to tell you where to look. So 4 times, what the students learn is, first time, watch whole body. Second time, only watch my upper body, or whoever the teacher is, the demonstrator is. Third time, watch feet to core. Fourth time, watch the whole body again. And then we go through a breakdown, explanation and practice process, and the students know there's this structure and sequence. And we'll use the same phrases to describe the same movement or the same purpose all the time until we're going around the room, and then we'll adapt that phrase if that person needs a different language use because the different words work better for them.
Yeah. So
we've got a structure, and we're looking to simplify complexity and direct students' attention, because otherwise, if you move in and talk in, what are they focusing on? We're working on the premise that everybody in the room is giving us exactly the same amount of attention for this demonstration. Not true. Then if we just simple about it, we go, there's 20 people in the room, they're stood in 20 different places, they're getting 20 different views. Now they can learn like that, of course, because they've got brains and they're motivated and they're amazing, because human beings are. We sort of forget that. We are bloody incredible. But if we're looking to make learning as efficient as possible for the students, we need to give them some predictability and some things that let them go, I know where to look. We're not taught how to look. This is back to comms. We're not taught how to look. We think because we've got eyes, we can do it. We sure as hell are not taught how to listen. Don't get me on this one. Listening precedes looking. Listening is the big thing. All the other sensory bits work in between that. Going scientific there, right? Sensory bits. We're not taught how to do it. The fact that we get away with comms and create some amazing stuff is because we've got a brain and we're amazing and we're motivated. It ain't because we're as efficient and skilled at it as we could be. Yeah. So as teachers, we want to be as efficient and, well, for me, you want to be as efficient and skilled at it as you can be. And I want to make that work like that. So we say to our teachers, you have to do certain things. Then you go and be who you are. So I can't teach like Eddie Quinn, right? And I can't do that thing that Eddie Quinn can do. He nor me can teach like Guru Catherine. And when she's demonstrating and doing things, creates an atmosphere in a room, we can't get near it. We can't do it. I couldn't teach like you because you will bring the unique Mick Tulliness. But we can give our students predictable structures and sequences that enable them to function effectively and efficiently to make learning as streamlined as we can, starting with a group and then going into bespokeness as they're practicing. Unless we're going to do, as I said, and we don't do this in public classes by and large, I don't think the experience that Eddie had and Catherine had with me one-on-one in what we called the village, where I was trying to find my version of how Bapak Idris was with me for all the years in the 80s, well, how he's always been with me. No, I can't do it how he does it because my comms was inspired by him when he was a 23-year-old man, 22, 23, 24 in the 70s. I haven't met anybody who can understand people, read people and influence people in the last 50 years. I haven't met anybody who could do it as well as he could at that age back then when I was in Cheltenham with him in the 70s. Yeah. I'm pretty good at it, and I'm not where he was.
I know it's just a bit of a sidebar, but we talked about Idris last time we chatted, right? Do you think that was cultural? Do you think, like, and I don't want to sound woo-woo here, but whether or not I'm only now getting more appreciative of it, I appreciate now that I have been in the company of several geniuses. Like, it's quite funny, you know. So Danilo Santo, everyone goes crazy. They go, "Oh yeah, you're just a fanboy for Dan," and I'm like, "Sorry, mate. I'm pretty smart, and I'm quite. I can bullshit. I can make you believe that I'm pretty cool, but he does it effortlessly. Like, there's a bit where you go, I'm reticent to use the word define, but I have to say divine. There's a time when you go, just seems like that was somebody who was just blessed. He got a really good hand at this card game, in this card game of life. You know what I mean? And do you think, like, I know it's a bit of a sidebar, but do you think that was Idris, or do you think what was he a genius to everybody, or was he just a genius to you? Probably his best way for me to put that.
Well, he chose me for some reason, stepping outside of his habitus, his culture. You know, I found out many years later, he actually wrote home to his teacher and said, "I found there's this white English guy, he's a non-Muslim." And that mattered because everybody training in the style that he was training in were Muslims. He said, "Yeah, I'm drawn to sharing things with him, to teaching him. What should I do?" And he got a letter back saying, "Do what's in your heart," which has all sorts of layers to it in the culture. Certainly, there are cultural things. Is he what we call an outlier? Yeah, absolutely. And here's the thing, see, about this as well. You know, we talk about learning, and you see people who learn some stuff, and then occasionally they become a little bit full, right?
Yeah,
a little bit full. I don't know how learning can make your ego grow. I just don't understand this. I've got my own ego problems, but learning isn't one of them. Because if I learn something, that knowledge has been given to me by an exterior source. Right? That let's say a teacher, formal or informal. That teacher got that learning from another source, who got it from another source. So anytime you learn something, you're given some knowledge, however much you might feel you've worked to earn it as well, of course. All that should do is remind you of the links in the chain, the ongoing chain of people that you should be grateful to. Because it's not like, yeah, look what I've got. It's like, no, look, it's come from there down to me.
It's funny you said that, because I've been thinking about this a lot recently. So you said two things. So first of all, knowledge, you're a custodian. You don't own it. You're looking after it at the moment. Pass it on. That's one, right? You said something earlier which really got me, which was where, you know, you're talking about listening, right? And one of my heroes, Ernest Hemingway, loved his writing. Amazing guy. I'm glad he lived his life so I didn't have to live that life and I could just read about it. That's it, right? But Hemingway came out with a great line which says, it takes humans 2 to 2.5 years to learn how to talk. It takes them the next 55 years to learn how to listen. And at 56, I'm starting to understand that now. You know, so I don't need, it's, you know, it's like, but you'll know this, you know, when you see the guy who gets pretty good at martial arts and stuff, and you go, I can't work out, like, because he can do it. Or they can do it. He, she, whatever. They can do it. They go, but I'm not a good teacher. And you go, yeah, but you're not a teacher. What you're trying to do is you're trying to highlight how much you know, which is a completely different ballgame, right? Because, like, yeah, okay, you can demonstrate. I've had guys where they come, can I teach class for you, Mick? And they come in, I say, you lost half of the class. Yeah, but, you know, what about these guys? And I went, no, these guys who have just started, they're the lifeblood, mate. These boring, I say this to a lot of my long-time students, they're a nightmare. A lot of them, I throw them into jiu-jitsu to get them away from me, because I haven't got the fucking answers for you. Sorry for swearing there. But it was like, I said that to Sensei Dev Barrett this morning. I said to Dev, I said, these guys are turning up to me thinking I'm Yoda. And I'm like, yeah, I can throw a good side kick and I can strangle you. Don't ask me for advice on finance or marriage. You know, so, well, oh yeah, but I saw Mr. Miyagi. And I went, Mr. Miyagi was a postman, wasn't he? I said, yeah, don't take advice from him. But it was like, all of those things that you said, it was so funny because it all leads to this. And I want to say it was Plato. I've got to brush up. I've got to brush up now on my philosophy, because they're all merging into one guy now for me. Like, so Epictetus, Marcus Aurelius, Plato, Aristotle, they're just old dudes who they're pretty fucking smart. Most of them hung around with each other and then heard something smart and then go, do you know what? You sound a little bit smarter this week. I'll add that, right? but it was the thing where I think it was Plato who was talking about the more knowledgeable you become, the more you should understand, the less you know. And I'm really getting to that at my age now. Like it's funny because I've said this for years. I always said the same thing about Jeet Kune Do. When people say you do 27 different arts, you can't be any good at them. I say I'm good at about 4 of them. You're shit at one, and you've put 40 years of your life into that, mate. Like I'm passable. I'm good at one, and then another 4 I'm okay at. And then they go, yeah, but why do you need 27 arts? And I went, first of all, it's not a round number, which that could open up a massive conversation with us, because Jeet Kune Do guys go, I need 27. Why? Well, it's the most random arbitrary number I can think of, right? So that was one thing. But the other one I used to always say was, I've never met anybody who got dumber by reading more books. And I lived by that, Chris, up until about last year. And then I hit critical mass, where I'd read that and I went, well, so now instead of being half informed and half educated on it, I know more about it now, but overall I know less about it because there's so many more quandaries, which is one of the things, because I have to get back to your book, because that's another thing, that one thing I don't know if you noticed, I'm knowing you did this on purpose. The amount of this book that makes you question your thoughts as you're reading it. Because I thought, mate, this is going to be great. I'll just pick it up, leaf through and have a look. And then I was like, shit, didn't think like that. And then obviously your bullet points at the start of each chapter, the ones, it's like, here's the one, right, that got me with martial arts. Chapter 3 is straight in with it, rest and recovery. How many martial artists or how many teachers actually, and it would be remiss of me not to mention this great man. So one of the guys who used to train with us on a Tuesday night, like the infamous Terry Barnett class, which was you had to be invited to train there. And that wasn't BS either. Terry had this guy in there who was the head osteopath at the London School of Osteopathy. Yeah, Savash Mustafa, who passed away tragically at 61, 62. His funeral was like a who's who of British martial arts when we went there. And the reason I have to say it, I have to mention him, is he was the first person ever in martial arts to turn around to me and go, so how much rest are you getting? He goes, because Mick, what do? You do a really physical job. And then how do you relax? What, by overloading your central nervous system with this whole survive or die? Yeah, but that's how I relax. And he went, and how often are you crashing out, mate? And I went, in what way? And he goes, right, okay. So how often do you decide you're going to drink 7 or 8 beers in one night for no other reason apart from the fact that you're bored or you can't sleep? And it was like, you know, that bit where you went, shit, I've never, yeah, I don't want to sound like a hipster, but hashtag, I've never felt so seen, you know, because I was like that going, oh my God. And I said, is it that obvious? And he went, mate, the human body wasn't designed for what you do and how you live your life. And he was like, mate, you drive 90 miles to class, train for 2 hours, and then drive 90 miles back. And that's your idea of relaxing. So the rest and recovery is, as always with me, huge, absolute meandering preamble, but explain the importance of rest and recovery, not just for martial artists, because they should know by now. Rest and recovery for your average human being.
Yeah. And we've got active rest and passive rest, right? So we can be going for a walk, and that can be a type of active rest. You know, if I'm there with my back episodes of loose women, you know, then that's passive rest. That wasn't a euphemism, by the way. But no. So we've got to pick the two. And the great challenge is listening to our body, listening to the messages that our brain's given us. I mean, John will always say, you know, we're emotional first. We're emotional beings before we're logical, rational. We emote before we think and rationalize. I've had quite a lot of people who say to me, I'm not the emotional type. We'd categorize the vast majority of those as men who've said that, right?
Exactly.
And John is always saying emotions are signals from the brain that we're getting through the body. They're telling us something about our state or what we're perceiving in the environment or how we're functioning. And he said to me something in this book that blew my mind. He went, fatigue is an emotional signal from the brain. And I'd never thought of it I just thought like the kit's tired, And he went, no, you've got to, but the challenge is we've got so much noise in society that goes, don't give in to fatigue. Well, actually, you don't want to wait till you're that fatigued. You're not giving in when you rest and recover. You're doing something that's really very good for your brain. You go back 30 years. If somebody had said to me, oh, Chris, what part of your body do you think, as you age, I wouldn't have imagined aging, right, when I was in my 30s or whatever. But as you age, what part of your body would you want to keep healthiest? And I would have said probably spine or legs or something like that. Purely thinking like that. The answer for the last 12, 14 years since I've known John Sullivan is obvious. I want to keep my brain as healthy as I can. I'm not doing physical movement to grow my muscles or to lose some fat primarily. It's good for my brain. And in the book, it's movement. It's deliberately not even exercise, right? It's movement. Now, when we're teaching silat fitra, we talk about it as movement because we don't want people thinking of technique, because technique, if you're not careful, can seem like a false thing that I've got to learn. Improving how I move while I already move. So I'm starting from a different place. But we've got to have a discipline. It takes as much discipline to have a deliberate plan for rest and recovery as it does to have a deliberate plan for physical activity and training.
Yeah.
And we need to understand that. And we know very simply that you grow and while you recover. And we can be improving while we sleep, for goodness sake.
But it's so funny because one of the things that really helped me, because I'm an absolute geek when it comes to Star Trek and sci-fi, was the regeneration cycle of the Borg in Star Trek, where it was like, right, yeah, for 8 hours, boom, you're plugged in now, right? And I used to I'm total disclosure time here, right? So when I was younger, I used to have this thing where, luckily enough, I opted out of this situation pretty early. So first of all, I used to see how little sleep I needed to be able to function correctly, right? And when you're younger, I use this in plastering all the time. When a young kid turns up to work for me and I show him the way to do something and he doesn't do it, and then I get really sarcastic and you're him, aren't you? You're him. They said a man would come. A man would come and he would show us the way. We've all been doing it wrong. I went, you're the Jesus of plastering. And I use the same in jiu-jitsu where you say, have you ever tried to do an arm bar that way? Never thought of that. And that's just being a callow youth, right? Because when you're younger, you don't think the rules apply to you, right? So any accepted wisdom now is 7.5, 8 hours is pretty good. It's that classic meme. It's a classic meme, which is all the stuff that you were punished with when you were younger, right? And you thought was bad for you is now a joy. You've got to go to bed at 9 o'clock. What, on my own? What, and the wife doesn't want me to do a bit of, what, so I can just sleep? Yes. It's like, what, I have to eat vegetables? What, that make me feel better? That was a punishment. So again, it's that whole silly thing. So me, when I was younger, I was like, right, how can we do it? And please don't judge me, dear listener, on this, right? What was that? I just channeled Ronnie Corbett there for a minute. For some of you guys, I have to admit, as I'm getting older, I feel like I'm more like the Arthur Askey of podcasts now. You know what I mean? It's like, that Tommy Trinder. Yeah. He used to play for the Red Wings, so it's a bit of a silly joke. I'm just throwing madness out there. But no, don't judge me on this. But Margaret Thatcher and Ronald Reagan famously functioned really well on 5 years sleep.
Yeah. Guess
what happened with both of them? Alzheimer's, which we already have covered in just the physical activity in this book, which is sorry, but you're twice as likely to get Alzheimer's if you don't do physical activity just twice a week. Come on, man. If that's not a reason to get on the cross trainer, I don't know what is, right? But I thought, how long could I do this for? So I had it for a couple of years and I was squeezing a lot out of life. because I was getting 20 hours when everyone else was only getting 16, Chris. But I wasn't getting a lot, you know what I mean? Because I was suboptimal. I wasn't thinking straight. And, you know, as you said about the mental health, yeah, the emotions, which is going to lead me into something I want to talk about anyway, which is the mental health thing, right? Is literally, I think, with a lot of young men especially, is the fact that, first of all, to be tired, to be fatigued, that's weakness. No, it isn't. You don't have any control over that. You know, I'm going to sort of paraphrase Jeff Thompson here. You know, that whole thing was, you know, about, you know, fear. You have nothing to fear but fear itself, yada, yada, yada. And it's like, guess what? If you're not afraid, mate, you're not human, because you're in an uncontrollable situation. It's unfamiliar. And if you've never done any training, guess what? Deep down in here, you know that you're getting into something that you can't handle, right? What? And you're surprised that you're scared now? Mate, I'd be really worried about the guy who wasn't scared, because guess what you are? Psychotic or a sociopath. And because I've got sociopathic tendencies, I know that. But it was like the rest and recovery thing really, like, that hit home, because I don't know if you actually look, this is how savage I am when it comes to reading stuff. I couldn't work out why I was reading Rest and Recovery and it was taking so long. I was like, why is this one of the longest chapters in this book about stuff that I should just go, you know what, Rest and Recovery, I shouldn't be doing this. And it made me realize how important the rest and recovery is. And when we touched on the emotion thing, like, how important do you think rest and recovery is to be able to just deal with it? It's not even the physical. It's not the physical, because people don't understand. Emotions only here a little bit. It's all here. The central nervous system is the one that's dealing with it. And rest and recovery, you know, I found this when I had anxiety. Conscious breathing got me out. Literally, diaphragm breathing, conscious breathing got me out. And that was when I accepted the fact that the mind and the body was all connected in the spirit. So your thoughts on the physical manifestations of the mental health issues and how rest and recovery help that?
Well, I mean, obviously, if we're fatiguing, then you know, our emotional status is at risk anyway. And if we're dealing with anxiety or whatever it is, you know, then ironically, well, it's not ironic, is it? If our psychological, physiological, chemical balances are wearing down due to fatigue, if we've got another problem, then you know, we're not going to manage it very well. And I get exactly what you're saying. It was one of the things you touched on. You take me to a couple of places, actually. Mick, you tend to.
Try to.
One of the things that I've got most of Silat 50 completely wrong. Not the doing it or the teaching of it, but I was never going to teach it like this. You know, Eddie Quinn got me to do it. We started the camps and so on, and after lockdown, and people were coming to camps, and I had to realize that people could learn online if you provided good material. Oh my God, you know. And then Eddie said to me, we should add an extra camp in every year. And I went, why? What should we do? And he went, you should be teaching breathing and meditation and connect it to something. Because, you know, you've been doing that for nearly half a century. And you know, and I was like, nobody will come. And he was like, you're not looking on social media, Chris. If you got out there and started pushing out, Chris Parker started meditating on a daily basis in 1976 and started breathing practices and studying breathing practices in the mid 1980s and has been doing it ever since, and started talking about some of that, I think you'd find. And I went, oh, no, we're not doing that, thank you very much. And he went, let's do a camp and see. I was like, okay. It's sold out. I mean, we don't have a big space. We're at Mikey's lovely place in Lutterworth. As you know, we don't have more than 20 people because we want to get bespoke and we want to get, but it still does. We've got one coming, the special camp, as we called it, is in July, Blades, breathing and meditation. But the blade work is to do with breathing and connection. It's not, you know, fighting or training for fighting explicitly. So I got that wrong completely wrong. And then the other thing that I got completely wrong, so without Eddie Quinn, none of this would be happening, and we wouldn't have all the lovely people we got, because he's such a good-hearted, good-natured guy. Like attracts like, and they all come because of him. And then they might be interested in having a look at Eddie's teacher and seeing what he's like, but he's the magnet. And then the other thing he was saying to me, Chris, you could do a really good job for guys. He said, we can be great for women. We've got Guru Catherine, and she's just this wonderful, amazing, inspirational human being. He said, and I was like, what do you mean? He said, well, there's young guys who are confused about how they should be. And there's guys of a certain age, they've done the rough, tough stuff. They've done their fighting. They're not sure where to go. They're not sure what to do now. And I went, right. He went, well, you'd be great for this, because you're the older male and you've got all this other stuff that you actually have been doing for decades. You'd be great. And you got the comms, so you'll know how to play it. You'll know what to do with them. I nearly said play them, and that sounded manipulative. And I don't mean that at all. I meant you'll get to understand them. They'll get to trust you. You can work. And I was like, no, Ed, I don't know, mate. I don't agree. I don't know whether he organised this or not, but around the same time, this was a few years ago, Mikey Wright started, he would come over for his private classes. Yeah. And he'd be going, Chris, we'd be in the pub after. One of the things that I think you'd be really great at is a lot of guys. Have you been talking to Eddie Quinn? Promise. No, not been talking to Eddie Quinn. And of course, they were both. I missed it completely again. They're absolutely right on that. Where and it's like anything. If you can prove you are a trustworthy, reliable, experienced source, over time people will trust you and they will take from you when you offer it. And if you can bespoke it enough, especially, so it takes time for people to be comfortable with you enough to go, I need to know you understand me. They won't verbalize that. But a lot of people don't want to feel that they're understood too soon, understandably, because we've got to build the dynamic, build the relationship. all of the things that you just talked about, I had a thing, the other bit you took me to. So I was in my 30s, and I'd totally screwed up my career in a wonderful, just completely and utterly. I've never managed my career well all my life, Mick, to be honest with you. Like, I should have made a fortune. I should have just sold me for what I'm extremely good at. And, I would have done a load of work for business at a high end and made a load of money. I could never get into it.
Yeah, but that wouldn't be you.
No, it sort of isn't. It ought to be, because my wife deserves as much money as she wants to do whatever she likes in her.
Yes.
Right. And I hadn't worked that out. I should have done. She doesn't mind, but I feel like, I should have done a bit better there, a lot better there. But anyway, so I'd started working as an independent consultant. I was getting a lot of work through one particular guy's company, but very hard to grow on your own because you haven't got a reputation. So businesses aren't going to, be persuaded by you, or even give you a chance to persuade them. And I was working to make things happen. I'd get the odd jobs. I'd be working, not sleeping much, right? I'd be driving off down somewhere down south to do a 3-day workshop for some big company, and I'd not maybe sleep for 2 nights before, because I would always change plans during the night before I go and work. That was my stupid MO. I'm in my 30s, I can do it. I'm sat in my friend's bar one night, and there's an old boy leaning against the bar, and he looked at me and he said, you're not looking too good, son. I went, no, I'm fine, mate. Thanks. No, I'm good. I'm all right. I'm fine. Yeah. Working really hard. I went, yeah, actually, yeah. Sleeping. No, I'm just working hard, mate. Can't carry on like that forever, Now, I will now introduce my ego in my 30s and lay it out. And I looked at him and said, most people couldn't.
Yeah. And
I got absolutely what I deserved. So fast forward a few months, I'm up here where I am now on the laptop doing some work. And all of a sudden, 3 hours have passed and Christopher hasn't moved. As far as he hasn't written a word. He can't remember having thought anything. And this is not a meditative state. This is just a state.
Yeah. I've been there.
Right. And I walked downstairs and Mary looked at me and she went, oh my God, you're grey. And I went, okay, that's okay. Right. That's not good. Because I've seen a few grey people and the same thing happened to them within a few days every time. I was like, this is okay. She said, what are you going to do? I said, I don't know. I can't think. She said, well, what are you going to do? And one thing clicked in my mind, that a sort of training phrase, which is, if you can't move your mind, move your body. If you can't move your body, move your mind. If you can't move either, you're in deep trouble, right? So I was like, I'm going to walk. And I went out. It was about 10 o'clock at night. It was foggy, and we live at the top of a hill, as you know. It's very hilly.
Yeah.
And I'm just walking up and down. Can't think. Can't feel my body. Can't. Nothing's happening. I am absolutely gone. And I just keep walking up and down these damned hills. And then I'm coming up a hill, and all of a sudden, it started. And I got home, and Mary went, "Oh, you're looking a bit better." I went, "Yeah, I've just written a poem." She went, "You what?" So I've just written a poem. That's what got my brain did a poem. She went, "Do you know it?" I went, "Yeah." She said, "What's the poem?" I said, "The poem goes like this. I've got lactic acid in my mind and soul. If you've ever run the race so hard it's grabbed that particular hold, you'll know exactly how it feels, how it seals you up on the inside. And a part of you hides in that particular mist. Only you can't go searching to see where it is, for your mind has cramped. So you sit and stare, aware, for this is the only thought the devil lets in, that your friends all know it couldn't happen to them." And she went, "We better write that one down." So we wrote that one down. Next day I got in to see the doctor. I said, "How much do you hate it when the patient tells you what's wrong with them?" He went, "Very much." I said, "Okay, I'm ready to be hated, you know." And he went, "Why?" I said, "I'm having a breakdown." And he went, "Okay, the problem I got with that is you've come in to tell me." I said, "Well, here are all the symptoms. You shouldn't be able to tell me all the symptoms and come in and do that." I said, "I'm hanging on here, Doc. By the time I get, at some point, I'll be back sat staring in the corner again. And you could play any episode you like of Loose Women. It won't get to me." And he went, "Right, well, let me give you all this medication." I went, "No, I don't want it really." He said, "Well, I'll sign you off work. I'm self-employed." He said, "What are you doing here?" I said, "I don't know. Did I tell you I was having a breakdown? Don't want SEDS from me, for God's sake."
Yeah.
Best experience of my life.
Yeah.
Best experience of my life. When your ego gets you into so much trouble, we're martial artists. If I make a mistake and you break my nose, I'm not going to go running going, "Oh, it's not fair. I got my nose. I'm doing martial arts. I got my nose broken." Right? If you make mistakes in life, if we don't get hurt, that's great. But sometimes some of us need to take a smacking before we change. And I was just one of those people. You know?
Yeah, it's so funny you said that, because I had something very similar, doctor as well, and 32, and my issue was the fact that I wasn't living an authentic life. So I wasn't living an authentic life. I was working like a dog, making loads of money, teaching, but like everything I said was hollow, and I'm that good at bullshitting it that no one really knew apart from I did. But because I knew that was, I couldn't handle that. And I remember I remember I was driving down the road one day and I just pulled over and started crying and couldn't work out why, and just felt a void inside. That was it. Just felt empty. And as I said before, I've had 3 episodes in my life, 16, 32, 48. That's how OCD I am. I do it on a 16-year cycle, right? Whether or not that's a self-fulfilling prophecy or not, I don't know. But 64 is going to be interesting for me anyway. But anyway, each time you get through it, it's a bit easier, because it's like playing a video game. You know, you've beaten that boss. Oh, shit. Okay. And it's like a checkpoint, right? And I remember being in the local cinema, don't know how I got there, sitting watching a Vin Diesel movie, not even Vin Diesel fan, and I'm sobbing and I'm crying. And I'm like, there's no way that I can live with this. This is at 32 years of age. And as I said, I knew it was drinking more than anything, because the drinking was feeding the cycle. So I wasn't feeling well. I'd drink, I'd release that, and then I'd wake up, feel even worse, knowing that I wasn't supposed to be this guy. Went on a stag weekend with the guys, drank a load of, like, looking back on it now, this is the mad thing. With hindsight, I turn around and go, I just drank loads of vodka and Red Bull, so the combination of alcohol and taurine is what sent me thinking loads of mad things. But I didn't look at that, because obviously we're martial artists, so it has to be way more important than that. It can't just be taurine and vodka. Yeah, it happens to other people. I'm Mick, Tully. And anyway, I'm lying there, and I remember getting back on the plane from this stag do, feeling like my skin was on fire. And it was really funny, because I said to my brother, who does like a few beers, John, and I said to him, mate, I said, I lay in bed And I was 32 years of age, and I got up. I was in bed. I looked up. I'm actually in the room that it happened right now. I looked up at the ceiling. And I said, God, if you get me out of this, I'll never drink again. And after 2 days, I felt okay physically, but mentally I wasn't good. And because I'm so competitive with myself, I stopped drinking for a week. Then it was 2 weeks. Then it's 3 weeks. And then that was annoying a lot of my friends saying, oh, you'll be back on it. And I'm like, no chance, no chance. And then obviously the enfant terrible in me is I'll do stuff because I know it's going to piss people off. So yeah, you're not good at jiu-jitsu. Okay, I'm going to do it and I'm going to be exceptional at it. And then I'll turn around and say, I'm not really even interested, but I knew it was going to piss you off anyway. So that's a sidebar anyway. So I went to the doctor and I said to the doctor, I just can't shake this fear of dread. And he did the same, Chris. He wanted to give me, and this is the thing, people demonize it and they say, don't take it. Guess what? Trust the science. If mentally you think you can get out of it, great. If not, get on the Xanax, man. You know, it'll help you. It'll take the edge off it. And you'll be able to work your way back. You'll get the brain chemistry right, all of that. Anyway, my doctor turned around, got a piece of paper, and he said, he goes, I don't want to get you tea or anything, or coffee. He said, would you like some water? And I went, yeah. And he gave me a piece of paper, and what he did was he folded it over and he drew a line down it, and then he drew a line. So one vertical line and one horizontal line. And he wrote on the top, good. And he said, look, can you do me a favor? Just write down all the stuff that you do in your life that makes you feel good. And he gave me about 2.5 minutes to do it, right? Walk back in, I'm thinking, exercise and futility. And then he turned around and he said, see the other side? I went, yeah. He goes, write bad on the top of that. So it was so smart the way he did it. He said, you write bad. So that meant that I had to take ownership of the badness, right? And he said, write down the 3 things that you do. I'm not even going to look at it, but write down the 3 things that you do in your life that know are bad for you. And like, I don't want to sound like, a typical Catholic, when you go to confession and it's like, what do you do? Oh, I was bad to my mum and dad. You're like, I stole a load of stuff. You never tell the truth, do you? But this way, he was like, write it down. So I wrote it all down. He didn't even look. It was so funny because he got it, he folded it over, ripped it up, scrunched it into a ball, threw it at me. He says, put that in the bin. And I went, what? He said, put that in the bin. So I got up, put it in the bin. He gave me the other piece of paper that had good on it. Right, I had to get it laminated in the end. He said, right, do 2 of them a day and come back and see me in a month. Tell me how you feel then, right? And I kept that piece of paper in my wallet for a year, and it was almost disintegrating. And then at that point, and again, that was the one that got me about the power of the human mind there, because it was like he said, he goes, it was you and your brain that got you in here. It's you and your brain will get you out of here. Because he did say to me, he goes, if you want, I can give you something that will help. He said, but do you really need that? And it was one of those things where I said to him, mate, I said, I really hope that you're not being bugged by the CIA and Big Pharma, mate, because you're going to be out of a job. You shouldn't be doing this. But it was so funny because that's going to lead me on to the one chapter that got me out of everything, that really started making me question stuff, was about cognitive function. And with me, I overanalyze everything. And I truly believe that we are being bombarded with so much information via smartphone and everything else that I just don't think that evolutionarily we're ready to take the amount that's coming at us. Can you explain that for me, please?
Well, I mean, I'm agreeing with what you're saying, Mick. I mean, John assures me there's very good research that's starting to show already how brains are changing, because of course brains change. The proper term I've been taught is neuroplasticity. Our brain, as we learn, our neural connections change. We actually change our brains, and if we've got a good process, our brains can keep learning and changing positively a lot longer than people think. Well into what we'd be calling old age. So we know the brains are responding to these things, and the brains are changing because of the technology that we can't get away from, or that's in some senses designed to make us be drawn back to it, to almost become addicted if we can be. And so there is a balancing act to be had here with these things. And again, it's something that John writes about in the book. Although there's some technology he's recommending, it's very good science, and you're told how to use it and the way to use the science to measure and monitor and improve brain function. It's good science and it's safe. But we have well, you stand there waiting for a bus or a taxi, and everybody around you is going to be on their mobile phone, right? I mean, it's a gimme now.
Yeah,
it's just people can be walking down the street on the damn phone, which always surprises me. And yeah, sometimes people have said to me, well, if the brain always wins, how is it that you can have these problems, like that you can start to suffer from anxiety or whatever, other issues? Well, because that's the stimuli you're giving your brain. So the brain's adapting, and that's what it's doing for you. And your doctor was bang on the money, right? If you give it different stimuli, it will adapt and change, and you'll find yourself in a different place emotionally and psychologically. So the brain always wins doesn't mean that we can't get ourselves very, very scared to a point where we freeze. We can. It doesn't mean that we can be scared, that we'll never be scared when we actually don't need to be. Sometimes we will. It doesn't mean that we won't feel stress or pressure. But actually, we can work with this amazing piece of kit to create different outcomes if we need to.
The brain being able to handle the amount of information that's being sent to us at the moment. As you said earlier, I can't work out. I see people walking down the road and they don't look like they can multitask. So I don't think they should be on their phone playing Candy Crush and crossing over when, there's a van there. But I don't think it's that really worries me. I think what really worries me more than anything, Chris, is the fact that we're being bombarded with information, and a lot of it isn't very good. There's a lot of insidious stuff out there at the moment. And it was like you said earlier, which made me smile, which is we can't even now agree on facts. Yeah, it's a bad thing about scientists, right? Scientists are always trying to find out. Not other people. They're not going to try and find other people out to be incorrect. They want to make sure that they're incorrect, because we're constantly solving, which is we're trying to look for just a better answer. Yeah. And I just don't know. Becoming a grandfather is one, and being a father and just getting older, which, just as I'm saying it, maybe one of my biggest problems is the fact that, as I've said a few times on the podcast recently, with jiu-jitsu, I've had to rethink everything because I felt like an old guy. Some of the older guys, girls who are listening to this all understand where I'm coming from. Back in the 1980s and 1990s, you saw that guy, that malingerer. I like that word. Like a malingerer in a pub, in a nightclub or a fun pub. And you're like, dude, shouldn't you be at home now? You shouldn't be here. And that's how I felt in jiu-jitsu. I felt like I was in a nightclub surrounded by all these young kids. And I'm like, sorry, but you're not young anymore, Mick. And I think that's one of my issues with today's society, is feeling like I don't want to, that is the classic Billy Connolly, where he said, his granddad's the same age as Ronald Reagan, and they don't allow him to have the remote control. It's that point where I just don't want to be a person that just gets left behind, which actually reading the book has actually helped me a lot, because to understand that my process can change. So the process I had at 30, 40, 50, didn't really understand my process because I didn't really need it. I was on autopilot. And I think as you get older, I think you need to understand it, if nothing else, to try and control it. The bits that aren't really working for you. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. It's the thing that we talk about in Silat Fitra a lot, because at the age of the three senior gurus, is, like, if you're in your 30s or your 40s, you need good training mechanisms. And we don't just mean like how you do your physical martial art practice, back again to having a good brain management process that works for you. But you're not training just for next week or the week after. You're training so that you can maybe train in your late 60s, in your 70s, if God willing, if you get there in your 80s. And little bits, we touched on this before, I think, little bits of injury that you think you've cleared up that you don't notice in your 40s and your 50s. Some of them will start to, in my experience, start to appear in the 60s and go, hey, forgot about me?
Remember me?
That broken nose? Now listen, let's have some sinus problems. Oh, why? Well, because the kit's just getting a bit older, you know, and we live, I think, particularly in Western cultures, where we have an idea of what success is, and it's some forms of expressive power, whether it's lots of money that's manifested through clothes or cars, or it's knowing, being an expert and having lots of followers that, you know, need to learn from you. As a basic rule, you know, you're going, okay, that's all good, I get it, but we are going to, the kit, so I think of it, is going to decay. Right, at some point. So your training should be preparing you for that, so you're adapting as you age. So of course, you know, if you're not enjoying your training, pick something to do that you enjoy, because the best reason for doing it is enjoyment. And especially when you get older, you know, like you go, oh, I'm not doing it to win competitions now, or I'm not, you know. I entered a poetry competition recently, and this is true, they had a category for people over the age of 65 with a special bonus prize.
Wow.
And I was like, wow, I'm in that one. Do you know?
Yeah.
I phone up the bank now and they go, can you give me your date of birth? And I'm like, why do you remind me? It's, you know, 1957, 1957. And then they go, and your email address, and I tell them, and it's an AOL email address, and I go, that's how old I am, right? And we've established my age.
Yeah.
And you know, you go, well, everybody's younger now. Like you were saying, there's all these red cars since I bought one. Well, everybody's younger since I got older. How does that happen? And it's natural. It's what happens to us. And we've got to find a, you know, we talked last time about the idea of elders and said they could be kids.
Yeah.
But actually, it was another thing that Eddie Quinn said to me that I got wrong, that I hadn't thought about. He said, like, you know, it's not just the people that we can be useful for, because we're not attracting people that want to scrap primarily. I mean, a lot of the people that train with us would pick me up and throw me through a wall, but they're not here because we can be useful to them as teachers. You know, they're not going, Chris has had more fights than anybody else, so we want to train with Chris, because he blatantly hasn't. You know, they've got different motivations for training. But we've got to get used to the fact that we're getting old. And Eddie was like, he said this to me, and I was like, oh, that's nice, thanks. But I was not offended remotely. We were laughing about it. But he said, they're watching you age.
Well, yeah, you see this,
and having an elder that they can watch age, and you know, you're modeling it. And I went, I'm really not trying to model it. I'm just being how I am, managing the process. And he went, that'll do. Just keep doing it.
Chris, do you see, this is the thing. It's one thing I say about Danny Santo. It was really funny because Rick Fay used himself as a cautionary tale. We were up in Lilleshall recently. We had a camp up there, and Rick said to me, he said, look, don't do what I did. Because I would say to him, every time I see him, I say, oh, you sod. And he goes, well, I said, everything you told me is coming back now. I go, yeah, remember the young guy that I met, Mick? Yeah, you remember you always had that shot, right? Yeah, I used to always say to him, you see that there? That's the ambulance. See that there? That's the hearse. And I used to come out with all that silly shit, you know. And Rick says, so how's the ambulance and the hearse doing these days? They need a bit of choke, mate. And I'm really showing my age when I have to use that line, right? And then he said, we were talking about Guru Dan, and he said, I never got it. And I went, what do you mean you didn't get it? He goes, I always thought, you know, follow this example. He goes, I was following an example. What I needed to do was I needed to age like him. And he said, it was like him and Vunak. He said, you know, you look at it this way, because we were chatting, he asked me about like BJJ. And I said to him, I can't handle hypocrisy because I'm a bit of a hypocrite, so I really hate it. You know, it's like, you know, when you meet a homophobe and you find out that he's the gayest man you're ever going to meet. You know, it's one of those where it's like, oh, you don't like gay people? See you in 15 years' time at Pride, mate. Because it's like, I hate hypocrisy because I know deep down I'm a hypocrite and I hate that part of me. So I fight tooth and nail. It's like, you know, when people say you're a good person, you go, no, I'm actually a really horrible person, but I choose to do good things all the time because I know deep down that doing horrible stuff it'll get me there faster and quicker. And it'll get me, but that isn't who I want to be. I don't want to live that life, right? But it was like Rick said to me about the jiu-jitsu and stuff and the aging process. And I went, so this, Rick, I said, you know, I'm running on iOS 17.0. Like, it's the best you got at the moment. I said, but unfortunately, I said, see this here now? I said, I'm a second generation iPad. I said, facial recognition, mate. I said, I don't even have the thumbprint on mine. That's how old my iPad is now. That's me. So the hardware's old. The software can be improved. But then there's a point where you have to accept that this is what you're going to be. And it was what Rick said. He goes, I spent all these years, I just wanted to be functional. And he goes, but by being functional, guess what happened? I ruined my own hardware. And it's the truth. It's like, you know, Rick never mentioned Vunak, but if you look at Paul now, that guy was like, I don't want to sound out of order. In the 80s, we all wanted to be Paul Vunak. I don't think anyone wants to be him at the moment, physically anyway. You understand where I'm coming from. And then you look at Danny Osanto and you talk to him and it's like Danny Osanto was the first person I met with an iPod back in the day. And I was like, Guru, what's this? He goes, there's 10,000 songs in here. And I went, tape? What? He goes, no, you get them. And it's a file on a computer. He goes, I'll show you. And I'm like, I was looking at it at the time. Guru was like 20 years older than my dad. No, he was 15 years older than my dad at the time. My dad couldn't work out how to use a phone, you know, and I was like, that's the sort of guy I want, because I want to wrap it up, if you don't mind, right? Like we'll do the whole way you can get the book and everything afterwards, right? But we'll be able to put that link in on top, so you'll be able to find that in the blurb that we put in this, right? But the last thing, which is probably the most important, right? So I've got the book in front of me. So I'm going through the process, and I did the socialization and communication, right? And the bits that got me that I really loved was, as I'm getting older, I'm really, really sentimental. I'm a soft sod, really. I always say I'm the world's highest functioning sociopath, but I always say to Annie, Annie sort of pussified me, right? So she domesticated me, because I was like this masterless samurai. You know, I wasn't connected to anybody, all of that bullshit. I just watched too many movies in the 80s. You know the score. You know, from 1986 to about 1989 till I met Annie, I was literally a training montage. Honestly, I went to work and then it was Survivor, bit of that, getting ready for some battle that was never going to happen anyway. And then I met Annie and she turned me into this human being, which like I fell in love with her first. And then we had children. I fell in love with them. And then Will, you think you've experienced every emotion in the world. Then you have a grandchild and then you're like, melt that. What the hell? How is, but I'm connected to you, but I'm not connected to you. And you're a generation away from me. And now, and it's all that mad stuff where guess what? I need you to remember me as being Ace. I need you to remember me as being something out of, like, if there's a Hallmark movie and there's a granddad in it, they want to be remembered as being something good, right? So what I loved was, like, the proactive thing was good, but it sounds woo-woo when I say this, but it's like, you know, so you got proactive and then it's got family life, show affection. And I'm looking at this and I'm like, as I said, I've got the book in front of me and it's just everything. It was empower the children, be positive, be on the good stuff. And it's something that I'm trying to do a lot at the moment, right? Which is, I know it's a real buzzword, that high agency person, right? And I've been called upon it recently a couple of times for different people, and they've turned around and gone, Mick, you were the only person I could think of at the time. And I'm like, you know, I make a joke out of it. Go, in a crisis, I'm the guy you come to. And they're like, yeah, but yeah, you get shit done. You don't judge me about it. You don't get emotive in the middle of it. You just, which, by the way, is the last vestiges of my sociopathy. Yeah, where it's like, yeah, okay, I can do that. Like we can do that, no problem. Yeah, but it was the fact that that all led, right? The socialization and the communication led, and it's just so good the way that as I read it, led so well into synergy, because I thought I had this synergy by reading this. I hope this makes sense to you, Chris. I hope that I felt like I had some sort of synergy by reading that. And then the last chapter, boom, all together. And you're going, I didn't even think about that. I didn't think about that. And it's just so thought-provoking. It's unreal. So tell me, when can I expect synergy? That's what I want.
Yeah, I mean, again, well, where do we go with things there? You role models that inspire us can inspire us. We have to make sure that if they're those amazing, rare individuals that we'd correctly call outliers, that we learn from them, they're inspired from them, but we do our bespoke version of them. We don't copy everything they do, because if we're not them, we ain't going to manage it, and it won't be good for us. We've got that element. We're back to complexity. If there wasn't a range of different elements, interconnected that we've got to manage, we wouldn't need synergy. But synergy, following on from socialization and communication, of course, from my perspective, we are inherently connected. I don't think we've ever got to make connections. We've got to strip stuff out the way to recognize connections that are already there. And that's why I said to you earlier that if I'm in my comms workspace, what I have to do is lose any sense, as well as I can, of what Chris Parker thinks, feels, believes, expects from this person. So the easier I am, the more clearly I hear you, and I feel the vibration, and my eyes will work too within that. But as I said, if I've got those things, if I'm at play, if who Chris Parker is, what he's emotional about, what he's scared about, what he needs to prove, what he needs to make this person think about him, what he thinks about the fact that person's got half a samurai tattoo on their arm. It's Eddie Quinn, of course. Do you know, well, I can't hear you. So to create complexity, to create synergy, which actually means stripping things down, not adding more and more and more and more and more. It's stripping down to the essentials that work for you. You've got to get out your own way. I think every training method and process in anything certainly that I do, and my contemplative study, I said this to you last time, is at the heart of what I do. The comms is next. The martial is next. I have an absolute throughput in all three. However, that's just my life. But what all three have in common is the simple underlying message. Chris, the process should help you get out of your own way. If the process doesn't help you get out of your own way, you got to review the process. And then, if I may just say, to do with comms and to do with like emotional sense of how we view ourselves. Somebody said to me recently, I've got a number of people that I do one-to-one comms training with. I don't do businesses and stuff like that anymore because I'm old enough to go. I only do what turns me on, what I want to do, and I do it my way and with people I want to be with. It's very selfish, and I'm not apologizing for that remotely. And they were saying to me, what's your favorite comms story? And they've been saying very nice things about me. They've done a lot of comms work themselves. That doesn't matter. They were saying, you've been doing this stuff. I mean, I started doing the comms work because of Idris and with Idris in the late 70s, about 76, 77. So I'm heading towards 50 years of it, which if you want to then think about aging, but that's the bottom line of it. What's your best comms story? And they wanted something where I'd read a situation, influenced somebody, did this with Mick Tully, and guess what? All of a sudden he couldn't lift his left arm off the table and he didn't know why. And the best comms story ever in my life, I was working at Nottingham Trent University, and a friend of mine was who also worked at the university, great martial arts guy, senior student of one of our great martial artists from this country of my generation, called Nigel Sutton, who lives out in Penang in Malaysia now. Nigel,
I know who he is. Yeah,
Nigel Sutton is a Rick Young.
Yeah,
right. He's just ridiculously off the chart, and so my friend and I were talking, and he said, you'll never guess who's working on this campus now at NTU. I went, no, who? He said, Stephen Chan. Now, Stephen Chan.
I remember Stephen Chan.
Karate kid, but high-graded 7/8 dan in 2 different styles of Goju, trained and graded in Okinawa, great martial artist, one of the country's leading academics. Superb published poet. He writes all sorts of books on politics and influence, like internationally. He was sent to work in Africa to help sort of create change in Africa. He got an OBE for his political work recently. Absolute, I've been reading him in combat and everything else. And what I loved about him was he was the guy who always put himself down. Yeah. He was the worst person in the class, even though he was a 6 down at the time or whatever. So anyway, my friend says, yeah, he's working here somewhere. I went, wow. Next day, I'm going down a corridor. I'm 20 minutes early for a lecture because I like to get there early and sort of be ready. Go past this door, Professor Stephen Chan. I've missed the door previous, that is the secretariat for Professor Stephen Chan, which is where you go to book your appointment with Professor Stephen Chan. Anyway, I've got 20. I see the door. Now, I'm the comms guy, right? I'm supposed to be pretty bloody good at this stuff. My hand, I should have spotted the signs earlier. My hand knocked on the door without me meaning it to, right?
Right.
And this voice inside goes, come in. And I thought, and it is a lean, thin, brilliant, thick, straight black hair down to his shoulders, right? And this voice was deep, come in, interesting voice. I was like, and then my hand opens the door and I'm in. I could have run at that point, but I didn't because I was not thinking properly. And I've shut the door, and he's a serious academic in the place. He's got a big office and a big table at that end with a big chair, and he's got a table over here with a few chairs. It's one of those offices. And he's there in what he always wears, 2-piece suit, collar, shirt, open collar. And he looks up, and he looks at me, and he goes, yes. And then it dawns on me what I've just done, and I'm thinking to myself, why am I here? What am I going to say to this man? And he didn't twitch. He just sat there for about 4 years, maybe 3 or 4 seconds, right? But he didn't twitch like that. And then the comms genius, oh yeah, you talk about turning up under pressure. The comm genius, absolutely, mate. This is why I've been studying this stuff. This is why you'd come to me for comms training. I stood there for 3 or 4 seconds. My brain wouldn't work. I should have tried writing a poem. It worked once in the past. I didn't think of it. And my hand, I'm honestly not making this up on Mary's life. I watched with horror my right hand raise and point like this, like I was going to shoot him with my finger. And I'm looking at it going, what are you doing? What are you doing? What am I going to, what? Now I can't even do that, right? And it points for about a second, and then my mouth starts to move, and I'm going, oh, Jesus Christ, and I went, the comms guy, right? You're Stephen Chan. And he didn't twitch for another 3 or 4 seconds, and I couldn't get my bloody hand down. It would not move, and I couldn't think of another word because I was in bad enough. And then he just lifted his hand up and he went, and you're Chris Parker?
No.
And then the secretary came bursting in, absolutely ready to rip bits off me, and he went, Mildred, it's okay, it's Chris, we're friends. And we became mates for a period of time. And that's my favourite comm story, because I have never been so completely... My brain won. Do you know? Got in my rush. I was excited. Got in my way. Boom. But yeah. So anyway, I just want to make clear to you, right? Because I am, repetition. You were talking about this earlier. It's good in the right way. Good repetition is good repetition. So just so you know, you're Mick Tully. See, I can do it now. I've made it a skill. It was just an accident.
You're Chris Parker. Do you know what? It's so funny you said that, because when you mentioned Nigel, I'm old school. I remember seeing him, right? And then Stephen Chan. So Stephen Chan was bizarre, because when you were saying about the long black hair, he had I don't want to call it a mullet, but if it was a mullet, it was the king of mullets. It was a great haircut. And he was one of the first guys. I remember, I've still got that, because I've kept all the magazines. And it's quite funny. The only reason I've kept all the magazines is every now and again you meet a right BS merchant, and I've waited my whole life to do this, because you meet a BS merchant and go, I'm sorry, mate, but I have an extensive library. And that's the line I always come out again. Sorry, but I've got an extensive library, and I've got the article that you actually wrote, and you never put any of that in it at the time. Yeah, it's one of those. So and it just shows what a vindictive, horrible man that I am, really. No, I'm not actually. I'm just covering my own ass, because there's a few articles in there that I've taught some shite in. But as always, Chris, it's you blow my mind every time I talk to you, right? I really mean this. I said I've had a couple of weeks of like reflection on a lot of things, right? Usual human condition, yada yada yada. It's funny because as we were talking, it was when I was younger, I wanted to be older because when you're old, you're interesting, right? And I've thought about this recently because when I teach, I've got these young guys. I only said it today. I choked out 2 young lads who were there, and they were like, "Well, I saw this on YouTube," and I went, well, "Show me if it works." And now I just choked out both of them. I said, "You got to remember, guys, I'm an old man in a sport where young guys pussy out and quit, and I'm still here. You're not going to show me anything I've never done before." And then they go, "Oh, like I wish I could be," and I'm like, "What, me?" But console yourself with the fact how old I am, like 18. I went, right, in 20 years' time, you're going to be 38, mate. 20 years' time, I'm probably not going to be here. And if I am, I'm going to be cryogenically frozen at that extension they're building on Dignitas. So I'm not going to do the death part. I'm going there to do the Black Mirror episode. That's what I'm doing. You know what I mean? That's going to be me, right? But it was like, the aging thing is bizarre because it's like, if I'd been able to tell a Mick Tully at 16, who used to read your articles, that I'd become friends with you, interview you first would have been cool, but to be able to sit down, drink an IPA in your local, then come around, plaster your house, and then just be able to talk with you on a level which, to be like, I would certainly never say I was a peer of yours, but to be there and to be seen as a friend. I say this to Eddie Quinn all the time. I can't believe that me and Eddie Quinn are such good friends because he's Eddie Quinn. And then he goes, "Yeah, but you're Mick Tully." And I know that's the mad thing because it's experiential, isn't it? You see, the thing is, people will meet you and like, "Yeah, I've met your darling wife." And Mary's lovely. And Mary knows exactly who you are. But there's certain people on the planet that would allow you to be a different Chris Parker around them, yeah? And Annie's exactly the same. It's like when people say to Annie about, "Oh, Mick's awesome, must be great living with him." And she went, he watches World War II documentaries and reads philosophy and says about 8 words. And then and he'll go to a garden centre and not complain. You know what I mean? She goes, "I know he's a nice guy, but it's like, it isn't all, it's not." Yeah, I was going to say it's like not like living with Robin Williams till I remembered how Robin ended up. Yeah, but again, but you understand where people think that whole thing. It's like, as you get older, it's mad because I said it to John Will yesterday. I went, I only got into jiu-jitsu to hang out with you. And now I'm back hanging out with you and Melissa. And we're still able to do the stuff that we're able to do. But it was like, we'll sign off on this because this will give you an idea of there's levels and levels. Melissa will, and I'm going to tag Melissa and John in on this, right? For the simple reason, it would be very, very remiss of me to tell the story without giving them the credit. So Melissa's there, and I'm saying, "So how's Felix doing?" That's their son. He's 25 now, right? So I met John 16 years ago. So Felix was 9 years of age. Does he do jiu-jitsu? And I remember Melissa telling me, I threw him out of the class. Why? He wouldn't listen to me. He was saying to her, "You're my mum. You can't tell me." And she was explaining that she was a jiu-jitsu coach, right? Then he played hockey for a long time. And as Melissa said, it was a 4-hour round trip to take him to play hockey, right? And he got to national level, ice hockey, or roller hockey, it might have been. Did it. And then he knocked it on head. You got to do something, do jiu-jitsu. And then he's become a phenom. He's unreal. Like literally, he's one of those guys that we'll talk about, like as you were saying about Rick Young. He's one of those guys that we'll look at. And I said, it was so funny because this will give you an idea of how relationships just become so awesome in martial arts. So John's been one of my heroes for years. Melissa's actually one of my heroes as well because she's just a wonderful human being. And I said, "So how's Felix jiu-jitsu going?" And she went, "You won't believe this kid. He's there 1 minute." And she said, "He literally just teleports. He's there and then you blink and then he's on somebody's back." And then we're like, how did you get from there to there? Explain it to me. And it's so funny because Melissa's very, very common sense minded. She's a lovely, lovely person. John, trust me, how many John Wills does it take change a light bulb? We don't know because John's working out the 150,000 ways of screwing the light bulb in. That's the sort of analytical guy John is. And I was like, "Wow, teleporting." He goes, "Yeah." And then John just turns over and goes, yeah, the annoying little bastard. And I literally, that was it, right? But again, it was, the reason I told that story is the fact that this is a guy that I used to read about. I met through Jeff Thompson. This guy is a legendary pioneer. Like, when the book finally gets written on jiu-jitsu, John's going to be one of the apostles. Yeah, he was one of the first 12. And then I'm just hanging out with him like he's a mate of mine. And the reason I say that, it's like with you, Chris, just to be able to talk to you, glean the wisdom. And again, the whole thing where you were saying about, like, the one thing I will tell you is this, you know, the breathing thing and the mentorship and everything. I'm telling you right now, mate, that is the role for people. Like, I don't want to say me as well, but I am sort of like that. It's like our role now is to go, don't do what we do. Let me tell you what you shouldn't do, because I did that and it didn't work for me. And then it's like, you know, as we both know, Chris, we believe enough in ourselves to think, yeah, it's for other people. You said that at the bar once to a guy, right? And it's that whole thing. It's like, yeah, trust me, it won't work. Why? Because I don't want to. When we've created the relationship, I'll explain to you, you're not as mentally strong as me, mate. And it nearly killed me. So how about just learn from me? And sign off on that, mate. It's like, what you're doing, the mentorship, I really believe. But, yeah, some of us still want to believe with Johnny Lawrence and, like, Daniel LaRusso. Not really. Some of us are Martin Cove, yeah, John Kreese. And some of us, if we're lucky enough, we're Miyagi's. You know what I mean? And I'd rather be Miyagi anyway. You know what I mean? It's one of them. But Chris, from the bottom of my heart, I want to thank you. And then literally, you got to do where can we get this wonderful tome from?
This beauty, you can order it directly from the publishers, Chiselbury Publishing. From their website, you can get it off Amazon. It's available, as they say, in all good bookstores. And you get, by using a special code from the book, you can access technology as well at a discounted rate, because your brain always wins reader. And just to finish, Mick, I mean, thank you. It's a pleasure and a privilege to spend time with you and Will on the podcast. I really appreciate it, and for giving us, you know, me chance to talk about the work of some great people, like, you know, in this case, Dr. John Sullivan, or to be able to reference the beautiful Eddie Quinn and the wonderful Guru Catherine Hill at times. So if I may, for the last 90 seconds, just to finish, last time I finished with a poem, and I had a sort of bit of a guess about things we might be talking about today. So I got a poem. I think you've just set it up for me, Mick. Thank you. It's called Network. Network is just another word for association, which in turn is just another word for connection. And connections flow into each other, leaving us compelled to create meaning, which is, it seems, part of our nature. Whether that is the so-called nature of our own creation, or that which precedes and surrounds us and asks nothing more than we learn how to look. My career teachers, whom I called parent, knew nothing of this. Instead of a net working to connect, combine and create, they saw instead a ladder, steep, with steps beyond the reach of their imagination and therefore of my possibility. Career is just another word for life, or so it seems for many people, and life is just another word for opportunity, which is the result of space and curiosity acknowledged and combined to a greater or lesser degree. And that great space cries out for teachers who cast their net towards it, freed from the need for legacy or the well of justification, teachers with nothing to prove other than their willingness to release and their strength to support. And network is, of course, a word we use too often, too small, because here, right now, in this instant, we are all sharing the world together. This is our time.
Chris, I'm telling you, man, you're literally one of the only poets that I'm wrapped. And I mean that. And and I know this is all by design. So we'll sign off on this, right? You're the only poet I know that does that whole Zen shit, which is like, as you're saying it, I'm processing that. And then you're bombarding me with the next profound line. And I'm like, dude, whoa. And you know where you're trying to have to keep up. Does that make sense? Which I actually think, I'm going to be a real geek here now. So I've gone back, load of Wilfred Owen, load of Ted Hughes, load of Siegfried Sassoon. Why? For the simple reason, I think I'm at that age. But it's like, I always have to a reference when it comes to age in Gavin Mulholland, right? So, who will admit, like, Gavin's like, I shouldn't even be here. When you like his whole story about his cancer and everything was unreal, but Gavin's unreal because he's like yourself. He's a modern master. He's unreal. He'll tell you he's just Gavin. And you go, yeah. You're like, no, mate, you're a bit more than that, right? And it's very funny because he can distill literally everything about the aging process and being a male, but it's very Irish of it, the way he does it. He's goes, you drink Guinness? You drink whiskey? Go, no. He goes, yeah, you're not old enough yet, mate. And like literally, that's it. Because it's the whole thing where it's like, there's no appreciation. Only young man's drink, mate. You don't appreciate this. What, to sit down and just be able to savor this? Yeah. Sorry, you got to do that. And it's like with poetry, and it's mad because it was your poetry that got me back thinking again. Because the thing is, with me, the way that my brain is, I don't like that. Yeah, I like books and I like a linear narrative, and then I also, I'm the most Chris Nolan guy you'll ever meet. If I can get this disjointed narrative and have to put it all together like Memento or Inception, everyone else goes, I hate Inception. I went, what's the matter with you? Get an autistic brain like mine, you'll fucking love it. It's ace. Makes complete sense. I'm confused. What part of it? Japanese dude's really old, 3 levels down. It can't be that hard. But yeah, sorry, I went off on a mad tangent there for a second. But that's me. Imagine living in my brain, Chris. But mate, as always, I really mean this from the bottom of my heart. Thank you so much, mate. I can't even believe I'm calling you mate. This is my thing, because I wouldn't say that to many people, because it's like that's the affection I hold for you, because you're a real authentic man in like a business which isn't very authentic, which as I'm getting older, I'm less tolerant of internally, but externally I'm more tolerant of, because I just see people now and I just think maybe they're just making a living. Whereas before I'd be looking at them going, you're just a charlatan, snake oil salesman, and they got to pay the bills too. You know what I mean? But you are one of the only authentic guys out there, and I really mean that. And do you know how I know that one, Chris? Because you're way better at doing the impression that I do. The Batman movie, where it's like, when Robin turns up, he goes, yeah, because that's that face that I taught myself to do too. I bet you do it and I still pretend. But thank you so much.
Thank you. It's been my pleasure.
This podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
Shop the Sherwin-Williams July Summer Sale and get 30% off paints and stains July 18th through the 28th. With prices starting at $34.29, it's the perfect time to transform your space with color. Whether you're looking to revamp your interior or exterior, we have you covered with bold hues, soothing neutrals, and everything in between. Visit your neighborhood Sherwin-Williams store or shop the sale online. Delivery available on qualifying orders. Click the banner to learn more. Retail sales only. Some exclusions apply. See store for details.